meeting to order. Planning board meeting of April 11th, 2013. Put to order. And we have, I guess, Ella, do you want to do the roll call for us?
Sarah Kimball.
Here.
Dave Tribble.
Here.
Frank Bennett.
Here.
Betsy Harding.
Yes.
Darren Lovett.
Here.
Mike Mallett.
Here.
Dick Bennett.
Yeah.
Scott
is absent.
John Allen.
John Allen said he could not be here.
And Larry Seaver.
I have not heard from him. Okay. 4, 5, 6, 7 for 7 of us, so we were as follows. If there's anything that we need to vote on tonight, we'll all be voting on it. And we have the minutes from the February meeting and public hearing. There are some extra copies here if anyone needs them. And does anyone have any comments, discussions, corrections?
I was not at the meeting that is February 4th, because that was the date of my surgery, but in reading the minutes, I noted it was probably correctly stated that it says on page 2, Dick Bennett noted in the 2003 master plan, 63 out of 300 respondents favored rezoning. And it does say that at one point, but when you look at the, it says that within the master plan wording itself, but when you look at the actual survey that was done, it says that 63% of the year-round residents and 64% of the seasonal residents thought that Route 16 should be zoned village only near the village, but made rural residential from a point north. So it wasn't really 63 out of 300, 63%. So that petitioned article that did not pass, I think it makes sense for us at some point during this year to bring it up again, since back in 2003 a lot of the residents favored it. Maybe they will again if it's presented with the planning board supporting it, if we were able to do that.
Well, with the new master plan, I think we'll discuss that at least with the community.
Great, and hopefully we'll have it properly worded in the next master plan so that people will understand what it means. Super.
So it says, in the master plan, it says 63, not 63%.
Right, so Dick probably stated exactly, in the master plan it says 63, not 63%.
Yeah,
So
okay.
Dick stated it right, but the master plan was improperly written at that point.
So noted. So I don't think we need to change the minutes because the minutes are accurate representation of what was said.
But we might put in parentheses something about that in the actual survey it was meant to be stated 63%.
You could put that in tonight's minutes. You can't change those minutes.
Right, but we could put that in as a parenthetical form. The statement was correct, but it was not correct before it
We
was.
can't change.
Well, we
Wait,
can't
it is-
change it to something that wasn't
That
said or there. Or
exactly, but we can add a
Footnotes?
footnote, or
Yeah, something
Okay.
parenthetical of some sort, I think.
okay. So you're proposing to put at the end of that paragraph just a statement in parentheses that in checking the actual survey that it was 63%.
Exactly.
Out of 300 respondents.
Yes.
You're running a fine
Well
line
stated.
here. Put it in tonight's minutes.
That's all we
Get
can
as
do.
much
We
public-
never,
I think,
Because these minutes have not been accepted yet, that's what we're doing right now.
yeah.
But it wasn't said. I mean, what we're adding was never said or part of that last meeting.
I think we usually don't actually change the old minutes. It's just that in the new minutes it reflects the correction made.
And I'm happy
I don't
with
have a
that.
problem with
I mean,
that.
I think it's correct to have the
All right.
right wording in there. I'm
Okay,
a
so
little
that would be
trouble
in the
going
minutes for
backwards.
the April meeting, under where it says minutes. It was, minutes were discussed, and it was noted that on page 2 where it says 63 out of 300 respondents that in checking the original survey, that it was, the number's actually 63%.
Right, he correctly quoted the master plan, but the master plan left out the percentage from that part that was shown in the survey.
So it won't change the February 4th minutes, but it will be in the April 11th minutes that error was noted.
So I can just put, let's remember that after checking the survey, it was to be 63% out of 300 respondents, not 63 people in favor of changing that.
Well, Dick correctly quoted the master plan in that it said 63 people, but the master plan at that part was incorrectly written. The master plan at that part should have said 63%, which is what the survey actually showed.
Where did you get that from? I think that the survey's in there.
The survey's in the way at the back of the
Okay.
master plan.
Okay.
Is that this one?
Yes, but it's tabulated within the master plan way at the very back.
And Ellie might also note that this will be further discussed as we revise the master plan. Okay, any other
That's your handy
comments or
No,
changes to the
that was
minutes
mostly Phil.
needed? Corrections, I
babies.
should say.
With that, I move approval.
Second? Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the minutes are accepted as written with an extra note. Okay. Public comment concerning items not on the agenda. And I think, Dexter, yours will be the next item. Okay. Public comment, okay. Next item on the agenda is talking about the master plan. I think we got some money approved at town meeting to do the master plan, and I think we were talking about having sufficient funds to be able to do a build-out. And as I understand it, this the flyer that Dexter just passed out is on a meeting Saturday, May 11th at the Laura Hill Eastman Performing Arts Center in Freiburg from 8 until 12:30 as a free community forum. And as I understand it, one of the speakers there is going to be Forrest Bell, who has done the build-out for Conway and Eden, and he's going to give a report on that. And I thought, from the report that we got earlier, I've forgotten which meeting that was that the Upper Saco Valley Land Trust meeting with the planning board, was it, Dexter?
The planning board members were invited, conservation commission members, and selectmen. Some of each were present.
Right, and I think members of the planning board indicated that it might be a useful thing for us to have with the master plan update would be to have some sort of build-out analysis for Jackson.
And in fact, it was approved as Article 20
Mm-hmm.
that allowed us $15,000 for developing the master plan and conducting the build-out analysis. And that probably would suffice, because I think that when we spoke with Forrest Bell about it before, he thought the build-out analysis, I think, would be between $10,000 and $11,000.
Is Forrest Bill, is Forrest Bill, who's going to be at Laura Eastman, the same person who spoke at the joint meeting
That's right.
4 or 5 months ago?
Yeah.
And at that point, he was going over his build-out of some town, I think, down on
Wentworth.
Lakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, of course, we can't guarantee that he'd be the one we chose. We might have to do some sort of RFP or something to be able to get the right one, but at least he gave us a ballpark number, and he seems to do it really professionally.
And if you could see, if some of you were able to see his presentation, I think you'd get an idea of whether it's appropriate for Jackson, and if so, if he might be his company might be the one to do it. If you had any general questions about what goes into it, I might be able to answer those now, because I've seen his draft now, the build-out for Conway and for Eaton.
Would you want to, I would suggest that as many of us as possible try to go this Saturday.
I'm
Especially since it's such a, it would likely be a fairly significant part of the development of the master plan.
They are asking for an RSVP. I don't know if there's a limit on how many people can attend.
There's no limit, but part of what we're hoping to do is to know who's going to come so that we can plan some groups for breakout sessions where the idea would be to match people more or less by geography, and Jackson people would probably be with Bartlett people, partly to share ideas, but also hopefully to collaborate a little bit on a little bit of a conservation vision that might cross town boundaries, things like that.
Are you also inviting members of the Conservation Commission?
Absolutely, yep, and selectmen. Actually, anybody's invited, but we're particularly hoping to get folks like you to this meeting if possible.
All right. So hopefully, as many members of the planning board as can will attend.
On that, there was an announcement of a planning, there was some sort of announcement of the planning and zoning conference. Does anybody remember seeing that recently?
I haven't.
No,
just-
usually it's one in the spring. It's
Yeah.
run by the state.
This was the state.
council there.
I know I've gone to several on behalf of the zoning board. I encourage people to go let that go on.
Yeah, I've been to a couple of quite a while ago.
Yeah, I also passed out to the zoning board handbook. I note there's a planning handbook as well. That, I mean, I think everybody on the board should be familiar with, to really describe what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, I know Scott and I've been several times. Can't think right now of any other person who's on the board right now who's been. But they're very valuable meetings.
The planning handout, that's the Office of State Planning.
Way back.
What's it called?
I mean,
Things might have changed.
Yeah, I would. I'd suggest what I've done with the ZBA is actually purchase 6 or 7 copies and pass them out. I would suggest we do the same.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
I do. It is cheaper to buy copies from them than buy one copy or download one copy and Xerox it. I found out. Especially in real estate.
All right, other items concerning the master plan, Betsy, you want to?
Great. I guess we really want to get some direction from the board and figure out how you'd like to proceed. It seems to me to make sense to start off with another survey. Apparently, if we can do it on maybe one long sheet or maybe 2 regular size sheets, apparently we can probably insert it in with the tax bills. So that cuts down the cost by a lot, not to have to pay the postage. What we did in the prior year was to have one color survey that went out to everybody who was a Jackson resident, and another color survey that went out to people who were non-residents, owners, but didn't live here, didn't vote here.
Do we first want to have a meeting trying to identify what the issues are first, and then develop a survey based on what we think the issues are?
Absolutely. Yeah, we can't
and
just
I
copy a
wonder-
prior year's survey.
I wonder if after looking at build-out analysis, there might be issues that need to be addressed at that time. So I wonder if the survey comes first or the build-out comes first, and then the survey based on what we see in the build-out.
Whatever people think.
I'm mean, I don't have any, I mean, that's just my initial reaction, right?
Are you saying getting the results of the build-out, or you're saying just incorporating that in the survey as a question?
The build-out analysis is going to, if you go outside, you'll learn that not only presents what might happen over the next 50 years based on our current zoning and our current growth patterns, but also, in working with whoever does a build-out analysis, we can, ask for different scenarios. I mean, what happens if we
No, I guess my question.
X or Y?
My question is, do you want to have the analysis done first and then do the survey, or are you waiting for that?
That's the question I'm asking. Would
Okay.
it make more, assuming we're only doing one survey, would it make more sense to try to do the build-out analysis first and then the survey?
I don't know.
On the
Make it a
presumption that-
long process.
It could delay it.
If we get the survey going, we get a response, and we'll get the build-out analysis going.
Well, perhaps we should think about what topics should be in the survey and how many of them would hinge on the build-out. Because I'm sure there are issues that we would want to get people's comments on that did not really have any bearing on the build-out.
Listening to what you're saying, if we waited, I mean, we could be out 6 months to a year on the survey, because once we find somebody to do it, have it actually completed.
Yeah, I think this is at least a one-year process.
Right. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah. I mean,
So
my expectation is we won't have this done until sometime middle of next year.
So I guess that really begs the question of the urgency of having a survey to start this process for the master plan.
Well, picking up on Sarah's comment about how many things might be affected by the survey, I think that's really important. Certainly one of the things that might be affected is the Route 16 corridor. Whether people see the fact that there could be X number of houses built or X number of commercial structures put up there, that might be a concern to them. But I think that probably that's one of the few things that would be affected by the build-out analysis.
No, the build-out could, one of the things is going to project the number of houses that would be built in over a certain time frame. That certainly has some impact on the school. I guess I'm reluctant. I think it might be helpful to at least understand what we expect from the build-out analysis and what question we'll be asking before we commence with the survey. And there's no reason why we can't right now begin thinking about what questions should be on the survey.
Sure.
But I wouldn't. But I do think that it'd be premature to send it out before we at least are very much heavily involved in the build-out analysis and other activities, if not have substantially gone through the first round of the build-out analysis.
Dexter, do you have a sense as to how long it would be, say we chose Forestville, how long it would be until he actually did, start and complete the analysis?
It's taken him 2 or 3 months to do the Conway and Eaton one, and that included having to digitize some of the parcel data, right, and even digitize some of the house data. Where are the houses? We had to get a digital layer for that. So
And we don't know how backed up he is, how long it might take him. Maybe he's busier in the summer than he is in the...
That I have no idea.
Does it matter how long?
Well, in my view, if we could utilize at least most of this 15,000 this year, that would be a good thing. Not that we couldn't very likely get it reallocated next year, but we don't know for sure.
But, I mean, I'm not suggesting, I mean, a large portion of that would be for the build-out and.
It's very likely he could do
This
it,
year,
yeah, this year. I have no problem if that's what people decide is the way to go.
Because to do
Which
this.
is, am I hearing it right? And that's the survey after, is it?
If we were to do the build-out first and then the
First.
survey next, so the survey might, for example,
What was
get
the-
mailed in December.
What was the date on the last survey that you were, was it like 80, late 80s?
February '02.
Okay, 2002. And we wouldn't use that as a floor plan for the
I would, but
part two?
Well, obviously look at it and see if it's, what's relevant to be asked again.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, in fact, probably the large part of it might be.
I mean, we would want, I mean, useful information, I suppose, would be what's changed between the last 10 years with people's survey answers.
And that was the results, but the survey, how long was that process from the beginning? Did that,
People were asked to return their surveys by January 22nd, 2002.
oh, so it was pretty fast.
And wasn't that the beginning, though? Wouldn't that initiate the whole start of, well, the master planning of that section was the
Yeah.
survey?
it did then.
It did then.
It really worked.
That kind of drove
Focus.
the ideas forward from there, right?
Right.
And it, it got to people's concerns because there were
Yeah.
open questions, what are your concerns? What do what do you care about and what are you worried about?
Seems like there's useful information with the results of that on how you do your build-out, or how it's designed, right?
Was his Forest Bell's report, was it been completed for Conway or Eaton?
It will be by this date, but what I saw was just an almost finished draft.
Is that a public document?
It's not.
One thing certainly that comes with Forest Bell's work is a presentation. So ideally, if there were big things that developed from that, people would come out to the presentation and be able to ask their questions, and then there could be plenty of publicity about it.
Could I let's talk about the build-out and leave the names out of it, because I think we're going to have to put it out to 3 people and get the feedback. And I mean,
Yeah.
Forrest Bell is obviously really good at it, and he's done it, and he's familiar with the area, but
You're right.
we're going to have to go.
We'll have to have an RFP.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's only fair. But anyway, but now we have to figure out, because if we do the build-out first, then we have to find a way to get that information to the community before we do the survey. If what you're saying is the build-out will produce information that's interesting to everybody and will channel the dialogue towards what their concerns are.
That, or, I mean, that's fair. I mean, I wasn't going quite that far. I was just thinking that based on the build-out, there might be, or the process of putting the build together, that we may have some questions that we think should be asked in the survey. That are things that we grapple up with and working with whoever's doing the analysis, because we have to give them some direction, as I recollect. So those are questions, that and the results may prompt us to have questions, but we could certainly, I mean, I think what you're suggesting is we actually have a formal presentation, invite the community, and then do the survey after that.
I think if we're planning on or sending out the survey with the tax bill, there's one tax bill that goes out in June and another one in December. I don't think what we're wrestling with is whether to do a survey first or afterwards. I'm not sure that we would be ready to have a survey ready for sending out with the June tax bill, so we're looking at December anyway. So I think we should.
I'm not sure why we wouldn't be ready for June tax bill. We'd have to have some committee meetings and develop it. I think we'd want to put out in the EDAs the fact that we'd be developing a master plan committee, and we'd want participation by people in the town. Phil Davies, I know, is interested in participating in that, which is a help to us in terms of his ability to do surveys and to make the wording so that it's not going to be biased one way or another, et cetera.
And he was the one who compiled the survey last time.
I just think it's kind of rushed personally, starting, seeing how we're in April to get this out by June. And I mean, I'd rather, there's two pieces to this. One is looking at that as a starting point, talking about what Frank's talking about with this other piece here, and sort of combining them together so we can really have a thoughtful survey put together. And I think that December is a better goal. So look at what we did before, just to put a question together. We've had so many meetings. I mean, I could be wrong, but I just think June is rushed, personally.
Well, it'll be end of June, so
And also, now, what would the postage be? $400 to do a mailing?
yeah, I don't really know, but probably at least that.
Well, let's
There are some
say
2,000
1,000.
residences.
Oh, 2,000.
I think there are about 2,000 residences. 1,900 and something.
What does the book recommend?
So you're saying we don't have to worry about
We
June
don't
or December?
have to
It's
do it
it's just
in the
an insignificant
tax bill.
number. We
Right,
can do it when
could
we're
be
ready.
ready in August if we're not ready in June and just do the mailing ourselves. I could handle it quite a bit of it.
Stand at the post office.
Yeah. Ride my bus. Good for me.
But I just think there's a lot of pieces to this to sort of, put this pressure on, like he said, have it implode. We missed June, now it's December. I think that's somewhat reasonable. We do have money allocated if necessary.
Well, there's more to upgrading the master plan than just survey and so on. There's a whole
Right.
section, the whole background information has to be looked at and updated. The first section of the master plan is the vision statement and goals, and that is something that we'll just have to go through, as a planning board with input from the committee. But the background information is kind of just digging out the information from census data and other sources to bring that up to date. That's a lot of data, and that is somewhat time consuming and is something we can get started right away.
That's absolutely true.
And in going through that, that might help to generate some ideas of what might be in the survey.
We're proposing basically that we start the build-out process, looking at who can do it, getting some RFPs in. I think in order to do that, it'd be smart to have a committee in place. Are there planning board members who would like to be on that committee? I think at one point it was going to be Frank and George Howard and me. George is now off the board, I believe he's resigned.
Who's going to be on that also?
That's right, you run that also.
What will the committee be charged with doing?
I think we need to get the process started. There are state guidelines on how to develop a master plan, and I'd like to see us have good representation from the town as we develop the method that we want to use to do the background studies, to do the build-out analysis.
Why would the entire planning board be part of that?
Just because it seems to take more time to do all that sort of stuff. It's easier to delegate out the updating of the background study, that kind of thing. If the planning board wants to do it, typically it's done by committee. I think that's the way we did it in the past.
Well, there's a difference if you have a small number of people who are actually planning and the actual work. I remember last time when we updated it, we just divided up all the background information, and every member of the planning board did 2 or 3 pieces of it.
Personally, I think a committee is not going to help all things. I'd rather suggest we just do assignments.
Okay, well, I think it's really important to get representation from the citizenry, people who want to be involved in the master planning process, how would you propose that to work?
We have public meetings with the planning board, perhaps on topics. We have a meeting, scheduled meeting that there are various themes that we have to address. We have a public meeting on, one or two topics. One might be the school, another one might be conservation or something, and then have those topics.
If I hear you correctly, you're saying how do we get people involved if they want to be contributors? Is that your question?
I mean, typically, when you're looking at developing a committee...
I'm saying he's saying having input, you're saying contributing.
Right, I'm thinking of a situation where everybody's sort of equal at the table. But I don't see that happening if we've got an audience.
2 revisions ago, there was a fairly large committee that was formed with quite a few citizens involved, with different groups taking different parts of the master plan. And then the last time we had was a planning board divided up as I said, the background information, but then there was also several meetings with other, getting input from other citizens, other residents, than those who were on the planning board. And I agree that we need to get some input from people who are interested. And it's in getting input for the first section, the vision statement and goals.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it would be good to get get some input on that, and maybe have a public hearing, roundtable type thing, or breakout sessions where you have different groups looking at different goals and then going back to the group and reporting, that type of thing, just to get as many residents involved as we can, so that this represents more than just the opinions of the people on the planning board. So if you have a small committee that is just sort of in charge of orchestrating all this, I have no problem with that.
How do other people feel on it? What's a good approach?
Divide and conquer. No, I like breaking it up into segments. And smaller groups, I think, get to talk to each other faster.
And that's an advantage, as I see it, with having a committee. The planning board, granted, we don't have a lot of applications and so on. We're not overburdened with that, but we do have things that occur at each meeting, and people tend to want to go by 9 o'clock or 9:30. So if you're really trying to work through something or other, it's good to be able to divide it up between 2 and 3 people researching such and such, or...
Yeah, I mean, I'm suggesting, I don't mind small committees tasked with certain things. For example, I would suggest one of the first things we need to do is get 1 or 2 people together to, arrange for the hiring, RP, or hiring of somebody to build up. I don't think, but then I would think there's probably another small group that could deal with, the survey, and another small group that could, beginning out working on what should be in the survey. Another small group should be working on perhaps arranging some sort of large public meeting to discuss issues. Maybe like we did at Black So I'd see this as multiple small groups, not a subcommittee that's steering.
That's how I had seen it also
Yeah.
in the past, that it was broken down into a number of small groups of people who took a segment worked it, brought it back to a meeting,
Yes.
and said,
But
this is
then-
what we found.
So you're saying the small groups would then include people from the town? We'd be looking for people from the town for specific topics?
I think so. I think that in looking through these, like I remember when we were talking about housing and land use, we got to Dick Badger and we got to people in the community that were right there, dealing with houses and land use.
Why don't we
Impact.
brainstorm as far as what are the different tasks that would need to be done? First is the RFP for the building. The other topics.
We're just going to put you on a committee next week, too soon.
That'd be fine. Sign me up.
Okay, we'll do that.
What was the second one?
Topics for the survey.
Right.
I'd say how about outreach to the other public boards in town, conservation, school. What else? Maybe that's it.
I think that's what's good about the small groups too, is 'cause they can go out there and talk to people, because that's what it takes, is just
And from that,
tapping people, the secret handshake and all, but tap you on the shoulder and, say, we could really use you for some ideas or expertise, and would you help us out?
yeah, probably also the Jay Henry and what he sees, from his perspective, what he sees the issues.
As the road agent or the, yes.
Well, actually, at road agent and as fire department. Maybe he has nothing, but you should, these are people who,
Maybe this outreach should be maybe keyed to the different sections of background information, where we can, as I recall, a lot of information can come, major source would be the last census. There's a lot of data that gets put up in a census, and then the other is the reports that are in the town reports each year. There's a lot of information there.
I think, and also we should everybody on the board should get a copy of the state outline for doing a master plan.
That's what this is, right?
Mhm.
Then we'd all have that basic format to look at.
If you have any in addition to getting the planning book, we get that
Yeah.
copy of it circulated.
So what was that called?
This is
There's a whole book,
Bill-
booklet on.
development master plan.
I think that's actually all online. I'll double check.
Is that on Gov-
That's going to be the easiest way. What?
.gov, whatever that
Yeah.
should go.
I'm suggesting, rather than just telling people where it's online, that we actually give everybody on the planning board a physical copy of most of those documents.
Well, why don't we give the link online, and those who want a physical copy, we can make them. Don't necessarily need a physical copy myself.
I'm sorry?
I said I don't necessarily need a physical copy myself, but those who do want one, we should be able to provide that for them.
I'm saying that because I suspect, I will confess that sometimes if somebody gives me a link, I might not look it into, I might look at the first page. If somebody gives me a piece of paper, a booklet, it's going to get read more often.
Is the previous master plan available?
Yes, and in fact, you should have gotten a copy.
You have this?
I don't know for sure if we've got some.
I'm sorry?
Did you get this as planning board member? It's usually.
I don't.
I think there may be some down in the cellar,
Okay, well,
neatly carved along that wall.
Maybe some.
Oh, I forgot, we can't get internet access here, can we? I don't think so. Oh, that's
you know, if I do have this, I'll bring it back, the second one.
It'll be obsolete soon.
wishful
I have copies
thinking.
of the two previous
So
ones.
for our notes that we're taking here, just so we know, we're talking about RFP for the build out, and I've got topics for survey, then we talk about outreach.
Okay, outreach, but I think we need more of a focus on outreach to have different.
And you're talking about the background, that's what we
Yeah,
started talking about.
background information, but then also you get to update the background information and then see what issues are still pertinent that we need to then address up in the visions, vision statements.
See, that's where I think we should almost start, is there at that point, is looking at the background, what's pertinent, and that's going to give us our basis of going forward, and then the other things are added on.
Well,
But I've never done this before, so.
Yeah. Well, it might be a good idea for all of us to read through the master plan between now and the next time we get together.
Look for it and print
No. I will admit it's been,
it. Does the, actually, I should know, I don't, does the master plan actually have the survey that went out? Or just the results?
just
Has the
summary-
correlation.
Summary of the results.
Yeah.
Do,
It does have the survey and results.
sorry?
It does have the survey and results. Is that what you were
Well,
asking?
it just has the results, it doesn't have all the questions of the survey.
I think it
our
does.
lesson.
Doesn't
There's
it?
a master
No.
plan.
That would be helpful if somebody knows what that would be that far.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, it does have all the, it does have it all, I believe. More land should be conserved, et cetera. It's all in there.
well, yeah, but it doesn't have the actual questions.
I think it does. Those who agree with the statement, more land should be conserved, even with state town.
All right, so this is,
I think it
it's
is.
just sort of a reordering.
Right, I think it does include all of the,
It has highlights.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what this is.
Packets.
Dick, you had it, is that the survey itself?
I have
Yeah.
the final product. So they have it, like ratings of town officials. How would you rate the following community
okay,
functions
so it
or
does have different
services
questions, great.
currently provided in or by Jackson? And then they did the results there. But I don't know if that same format is in the back of the map.
Well, I noticed that some of them are summarized. For example, the school. It said among year-round residents, the Jackson Grammar School gets the highest rating of the 3 schools. So it doesn't give each question as I thought it did.
Well, do we have access to the questions that actually went out?
Oh, I bet we do.
Yeah, I have them on this. That's what I'm
Is there-
saying. This is,
He has the entire survey.
I have the results of the survey.
And we
So
probably have the old
I'll go
questionnaire
through it once
as well.
again. So they have the results there, but then they have the question. This is what the question was down
Is that
across the bottom.
something,
That I
that is available electronically?
Sleep with.
Yes, it is
It's under
available
my
electronically.
pillow.
Anne is a lucky woman.
Yes.
It is available
Do
electronically.
you know where that might be?
Phil Davies has it.
Does he still have it on?
Assume he does, I don't know.
Well, if not, we can get this, on the right. I
Can I
can.
see that? What this is
Certainly.
in?
Can I put my name on it
I'll
now?
give it back to you.
I
I'm not confident yet, I just wanted to check to see
got
if
one
it has
with
the
Mike
actual
Mallett's
statement.
name in it, right there, 1988.
What's the red thing?
What is it?
You were on the committee.
Yeah, I remember that.
There's probably a lot of names there.
What was the year again?
88.
88? Oh, I was a young guy then.
You went to high school then?
Oh, yeah, we had, where is it? Wow, look at that. Leader.
There was a lot, I remember,
Fred Sims. The old days.
right, and that's
Till
look at
the
those
meeting was
names,
on
Memory
the
Lane.
upper floor of the old town hall.
But the main objective is updating this master plan, not rewriting it, using this as the template and updating it.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
I mean,
Well, new questions, new ideas, you know, new issues.
Making it relevant to
Right,
2013.
Come into the
Yeah, and
millennium,
But
but
just hope we're not
I
trying to
think it's fine.
overcomplicate what we're trying to,
why
you know.
why
I think it's fine
reinvent the
to-
wheel?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, unless, if there are issues that seem burning that ought to be changed or whatever, then I think it's great to examine whatever seems current. I think it's wrong to simply parrot exactly what was done before if there's something that seems more relevant.
But within certain parameters, we've got to produce a bunch of information
Right,
that is exactly the same. It's not the same information,
right.
but it's the same format. So there's a whole bunch of it that we can just,
Use.
Yeah, well,
I'm
what
not
you,
going far.
I think is-
no, I trust you implicitly.
Are you going to
know
survey
that well, you
questions,
shouldn't.
right? You're going to utilize a lot of the same questions, and you'll have
I'm a
to.
big fan of your wife.
but, I mean, for example, you know, the best spot's supposed to deal with transportation. You know, I don't remember whether or not last time we did it, we considered, you know, how people felt about, you know, ride-sharing services such as Blue Loon.
I think at that point, there wasn't even such a thing as Blue Loon.
So that's something that
Yeah,
we want to address.
Low-income housing?
Yeah, it's gonna come up again.
yeah.
Community facilities, we've done a major change there. But that's, whether or not we have additional need for certain kinds of community facilities would be a, significant, need. And I'm just looking at what the RSA says should be in the master plan.
Right.
Yeah, I don't see anything on transportation, and that's certainly an interesting topic. You know, public transportation, of course, it's a real problem. Any place where you're that spread out, I mean, we're just not.
Especially with an aging community and some people who might have difficulty driving.
And ideally, one thing that you come out with in your master plan is not just a current zoning map, which is what we have on the back, but what our intent is, what the planning board feels, maybe some directions to go. So for example, we might mark Route 16 as a wish to zone it for non-village commercial. Or we might decide that it's really important to recognize wetlands in some area, and we do an overlay of where wetlands are an issue.
I think another important issue is our current zoning prohibits lodging outside of the village district.
So you mean Christmas Farm Inn and so on, they're non-conforming?
Well, one could not
grandfather.
redo Carnarvon or Christmas Farm Inn or Whitney's anew.
Right.
Of course, they're grandfathered, but, is that, how do people feel about that? Should there be an ability to have to permit B&Bs or some kind of lodging in the residential district? That's such an important part of the economic base of this town, I think. I'm not sure where that fits in.
B&Bs are already legal.
He means building a new one, I think, right?
No, I'm not sure B&Bs are permitted in the rural residential district.
I don't know when they were zoned out.
It's a question of the permitted uses in rural residential.
Residential, uses permitted, single-family residences, multifamily residential developments, cluster family developments.
Would probably be under home occupation, maybe?
Now,
No, customary home occupations, farms, and the historical society or museum.
Well, the original B&Bs were to allow, it was to allow somebody with a house to take in boarders. Summer was the big time, and we didn't have a big winter industry up here. But you know.
That was before zoning.
I know, but I think that's carried over as far as what has been allowed.
I'd probably argue against that, but I would certainly support changing your zoning to allow it.
As long as the owner, operator was in residence. You can't have a freestanding house that you turn into a B&B and then you live over here. It's supposed to be your house.
Yeah, well, let's get into.
So, I mean, so I think this is a fertile area for survey.
Mm.
Yeah.
So how is it not a customary home occupation? Why wouldn't it be called
Well, I
that?
think that's where it probably fell under.
Yeah. It seems to me that it could legitimately,
Customary home operation, look at the definition, it has to be not the majority use of the building, and it,
right, it
And
has to
it's
be,
less than
it says,
three.
as long as it's secondary to the use of the premises for dwelling purposes.
I think there should,
And you can provide meals, but you can't advertise meals. In other words, you can't put a sign out and say dinner.
To the public or something.
Yeah.
But regardless of what our current zoning allows, I think this is, one of the kinds of things we should be thinking about asking questions about.
Sure.
Because, I mean, maybe we want to do more than just allow B&B. Maybe something like Carnage Inn should be allowed in residential areas or residential areas on certain roads or something. Maybe there's some kind of special exception process, which we don't have.
Yeah, there's no reason why you couldn't do something like an overlay district that if a proposal met X, Y, and Z requirements, and it could be townwide, that could be approved. Sort of an overlay district.
No, I managed to get us way off topic, but
well, these are all issues that would be interesting.
It all has to
That's
come
what
up.
I said, was brainstorming here.
well, I think our critical path is the build-out. So should we at least tonight establish a group of individuals who are responsible for
Doing the RFP?
doing what's necessary so we could actually begin the RFP process at least by the next meeting? If not, I guess we'd have to come back to this.
Yeah.
Or would we delegate and give them authority to even let the RFP out? It can't take that long to draw up an RFP for.
Right.
I would think that, at least my feeling would be that they have a committee to actually drop the RFP and send it out, but as far as making the decision, that would be the
Of
whole
course.
board.
Yes.
That- Yeah, that'd have to. Do
And-
people in Bethlehem do this same work?
I don't know if they do. They may not do a build-out. I would propose that we get a copy of the RFP that Eaton and/or Conway did, and see if we can adapt that to something useful for us.
I guess I'm suggesting we actually have set up a
Who would like to be?
two people who would actually do this, send the RFP out, so we can actually begin looking at things,
Mhm.
hopefully next week.
Who would like to do that?
I'd be happy to be on it.
Who would like to do that?
Exactly. You want some help?
Sure.
With someone who would like to help Betsy? You don't want to speak.
All right, don't. Okay. That might be helpful.
This has got to be the easiest task of the whole thing, so getting it easy.
I'll put it in big letters, help Betsy.
And there's a woman who does, she's hired as the planner for Madison, and she lives in Jackson. Courtney, and I can't think of her last name, but it begins with C. Couture?
Croto.
Sorry?
Croto.
Croto, okay. So she might be somebody that we should try to involve in one stage or another of our process.
What does she do in Madison?
She is the town planner for them.
Okay.
She has a degree in planning. So I think it'd be fun to involve her in our master plan review. And at what point do we want to start trying to get other people connected into the process?
It might be fun to encourage her to apply to one of the other positions.
She's taking a job from Concord, so I don't know if she'll have the talent.
And she has to still live in Jackson.
I'm sorry?
If she takes a job in Concord, she's
Yeah,
still.
she may not.
It's not much other than that.
Okay, so the question that I had a little bit ago was, at what point do we want to try to involve townspeople in this process?
Well, I think what we need to do is to divide ourselves up into the different topics and then get people involved.
Yeah, I think we should have something of a priority list or a format list so that we're not just shooting from the hip.
Well, just looking at the table of contents here of our present master plan, the goals were organized into a regulatory goal, natural resources goal, village character goal, economy, municipal services, and human services. And it seems to me that maybe we could use that framework for perhaps breakout committees, because the natural resources goal would be looking at the natural resources section of the background. Municipal services goal would be highway department, police department. I think we could divide up the background sections into, group them into related topics. And if we had certain people on the planning board sort of heading up each one of these efforts, and then getting other people involved. When you're talking about municipal services, that's where you would consult people that, like Jay Henry and people at the school, selectmen and so on. Now, in the RSAs, does it, I'm forgetting here, signify that we need to have all of these sections of background information?
Good point, you just got out.
What was your master plan?
This one?
That's the-
Oh, no, okay.
Is that the state one?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
there?
I see it somewhere in that file.
Oh, you just had it on top of the pile.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah,
Here it is,
okay.
stuck inside. Okay, let's just skim through this. So you have to get a work
Maybe
plan.
Look at that for a minute.
Okay, you want the
No,
duties of
just that.
statutes are RSA 674, 1,
Oh, no,
2,
I
3,
got
and
that.
4.
I'm sorry.
One is the duties. The planning board, 2 is the master plan and purposes.
Okay, so it says it has to include a transportation, or may include, let's see, if the other page is what it has to include. So it has to include a vision section and a land use section. The land use section translates the vision section into physical terms. Based on studies of population, economic activity, and so on, it shall show the existing conditions and the proposed location, extent, and intensity of future land use. Then you may include transportation, community facilities, economic development, natural resources, natural hazards, recreation, utility, and public service. A section that identifies cultural and historic resources, and a regional concern section, a neighborhood plan section, a community design section, a housing section, an implementation section, and an energy section. The only section that I think that, other than maybe transportation, the only other section I think that we haven't had there in the past and that we may want to include is something about the grazing property. Since that's gone through several studies with nothing really definitive decided, I think having something in the master plan that seems to be a community designed direction for use or non-use or whatever of this land would be smart for us.
All right.
Did the prior survey address grazing at all?
I don't think it did.
I don't believe so.
I don't-
Not specifically, I mean. And energy would be another place that I don't think we ever dealt with anything on energy and whether, certainly a
Good point.
questionnaire question should
Mhm.
some kind of solar or wind get a tax break or...
Mhm. That's a good point. Yeah, it doesn't
I'd be
appear
glad
that
to,
grazing...
I'd be glad to kind of work on kind of combination of grazing and conservation. If nothing else, begin to compile all the quote studies that I've done on grazing and plants.
Okay.
Well, I think that Larry was putting together,
Don't forget, go right to Larry to begin with the first time. I'm sorry.
he was putting together kind of a list of town properties and then what could be done with them. How would they be best managed for the use of the town?
Is that been, is that a current activity of the Conservation Commission?
Well, in a small, I know the next step was to go up to the falls and try to, clean up the paths and let the natural vegetation grow and channel people
Yeah.
in one place rather than just free form.
Well, in fact, I think Monday's Conservation Commission meeting dealt with that and went up in the falls. They were talking about preventing barriers to just put that channel out and deal with the road.
But I think he has a pretty good overview of going around, the town, the various town properties. But yes, it's a great place to ask people what they want.
So would this be a separate goal, or would this be part of natural resources and village character?
I think the survey would have to, among other things, we'd be asking questions. What does the town want to do with grazing property? Is it to remain in conservation? Do you want to take a piece that's off the hill or something and
Right.
sell them off and invest the money someplace else? That's been suggested. I'm not, workforce, there's towns about workforce farmhousing, but Gino at one time suggested selling off a piece and opening it, taking down Gray's Uber on and making it more of a park.
There's been lots of
That's a good
suggestions
idea.
over time.
Sorry?
There's been lots of suggestions over time.
Yeah. Well, that's another good thing is, what is the grazing garage? That seems.
Storage.
I'm sorry?
Storage right now.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing probably to consider in our development of the master plan is the fact that the school is currently involved in an enrollment study, how to increase the, or how to prevent, future losses in the school population. And that's probably something that would be wise to review in the community facilities section or in some way like that.
I think that questions about the school would be really important.
Yeah.
Right.
I've got a good list of potential topics in addition to whatever was on the survey before, as we've put out. How do we want to tackle background information? Do we want to have a group that will, do we want to do that separately? Do we want to do that in conjunction with goals and statements? Gather your data and then see where it points you as far as suggestions for future directions. I mean, there's various ways of cutting up this job.
Who would be a good person to bring the history section up to date?
That's probably the easiest one to do because that, the history of what's happened before, it doesn't change.
Right. I'd be glad to try to bring up to date the population and housing sections.
You said you would, or?
Yep, I'd be glad to work on the population and housing sections. So, Dick, what's the date of the red one? Is that 1988?
That's 88.
So that's why we had those subdivisions approved, listed that way. So we could then start with February, with March 2002 and take it up to date from there. And similarly, the real estate sales,
Yeah.
work with that. Is there anybody else?
So what would you do? It'd be 202 to 212.
Right.
Okay, well,
I don't know if anybody else wants to join me on that, or if we're going to do things individually, how you want to proceed. Anybody want to grab hold of the economic? Employment and income, or administrative services and facilities, for town finances, highway department, fire department, police department. Lots of things up for grabs.
What are the RSAs for the format for a master plan?
Pretty loose.
There is a plan book in the park. I was just looking at it.
That's what it is, basically.
That's it?
Yeah. It's very loose. It says you have to do these two things on the, and I would think one of the things we might consider doing to save some of our costs is just have the background studies on the web, and therefore have a fairly limited collection of our goals, hopefully with some photographs in it, make it a document that is useful and appealing, not just one that is always on the shelf.
So you're looking at 674.2?
Yes.
So what is it? Let's see what,
Sorry?
what's the hours in
674.2, and also 674.3.
And four is mentioned here. It's 2, 3, and then 4 is the adoption and amendment.
Now, you were looking at the master plan handbook from the Southern Regional Planning Commission.
This is chapter 4 out of developing a master plan.
We do have the Southern Regional one, but I'm not sure I think we may just have it digitally. I don't think I've had it in
That seems
hands-on
to be
copy.
the source that everybody should.
Yeah, that's an excellent collection of them.
So it's called the Southern Regional what?
It is the master plan handbook developed by the Southern Regional Planning Commission in 2004. I will, I guess I'll email to Sarah on that, and maybe we can just have one email go out with all these.
Yeah, let's get all this together. This particular, this looks like it's photocopied out of the book.
Yeah, it probably was from one of those planning sessions. I'm not sure if I have the others, but I will check.
It has a series of action steps. And
Now, chapters 2, 3, 4, and 6. From, which one is that?
this is 4 from developing a master plan.
Yeah, and it's not chapters, it's phase 1, so I think it's not, oh, it is chapter 4, okay, so maybe it is
Chapter
the same thing, does it say it?
Is
No.
this what you have?
Yep, getting started, yep, that's it.
Good. So, did you get that online?
Yeah,
Okay. So if you can get the link.
I will send those out,
Great.
as well
Okay.
as the OEP book that I have.
All right.
I'm not sure I have everything seen all of that. I sent you the around everybody.
Yeah, well,
The agenda?
the agenda was sent to the
Okay.
master list, and
I'll send
there's
all.
more, there's more than planning board members on that.
Well, and there's some that are obsolete.
Probably
Ray and
not.
George.
Yeah, right. So it needs to be updated, yeah. Yeah, I realize that. And I think e-news is on that as well as Ella, and well, there's a couple of email addresses that come here.
Well, I'll try and get, since I've just volunteered for this, I'll also reach out to Phil Davies and see if I can get a copy of the survey. I have the master plan here, and we all have it.
Yep.
In fact, what I'll probably do is I'll upload this all to the planning board site, and so we can get it there,
Great.
rather than email a big package.
Right.
That sounds good. By the way, do we still have Visit John Allen, who's our selectman's rep?
Yes,
They haven't changed that?
No, it's still going to be
he's
it.
still in
Okay.
charge.
All right, well, that, so their action plan number 1 is to get past plans together and research all action 2 is to research all applicable state laws and local codes relative to the plan. And step 3 is gain an understanding of the planning process and different types of master plans, select a type. And then,
Do we, in steps 2 and 3, or action 2 and 3,
yeah,
do we know if any of the surrounding towns in the valley have recently done one?
I'm not sure. There are a lot of towns, yeah, the blue paper. these are towns with fairly recent master plans, at least where the checks are. So maybe Albany, you know, on the state planning, energy and planning website, they have a list of the towns with master plans. So I looked through that, but there aren't a lot of them that have been recent, I think.
Maybe somebody would volunteer to talk to Albany about what they went through, or what, if there's anything unique or special about their process.
Okay. So that would be in researching out other plans. Well, I think we all need to get ourselves up to speed on exactly what, you know, what's in a master plan, what we have to do, and this is select the type of plan, and it may be looking over the different plans that, you know, there may be some other aspects that we want to incorporate into ours we don't have now. So I think all of us have a bit of research to do here.
Okay.
So I would think that if we all read through the master plan and made notes as to which sections need upgrading and which, you know, what information here is, you know, like the history, can stay as is, as part of that. And then I think also trying to identify various issues that we should be addressing in the master plan that aren't addressed, such as a number of the ones that we brought up tonight. Okay, I think a lot of us are working on a deficit of knowledge, is what I say, to be able to come up with.
Well, hopefully, so next month's meeting, we'll have some progress on maybe even some results from an RFP.
Mhm.
And we'll all send the month reading background material.
Yeah. I think that'd be wise, and then we can jump right in and get ourselves organized and start accumulating data.
And are we going to say a capital improvement plan is something separate?
I was just going to ask about that. As long as we're contacting the police department and the fire department and so on, do we want to be asking some CIP questions as well?
I think so.
Capital improvements plan is, as I recall, that is sort of the planning board or another committee doing it for the selectmen for their work, and I'm wondering whether the selectmen should be contacted about that. First.
It says here in town finances, it was the planning board had done on page 30. The town has empowered the planning board to begin work on capital improvements, and then it was a six-year plan, 6-year projection. In the bottom paragraph. Maybe I'm misinterpreting the...
I mean, I think at least as part of our survey, we should use that opportunity to, you know, if there are things that people think should happen.
I think it's totally relative.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, in the
We
last
do.
one, we put a lot of time into, you know, forming up the first ideas for the highway department
Yeah.
garage.
Mhm.
And, you know,
We've
we
done
had
some-
that whole community, remember
Yeah.
the charrette?
Yeah.
And the charrette, we also had.
We've
the
done 2 or
community-
3
That
very-
gave, you know,
very
that
thorough.
much input to it.
We've done 2 or 3 very thorough CIPs. One, you know, the original one was sort of inventing the wheel, and then we just updated it at least once, if not twice.
It's fortunate that over the last 10 years, I mean, the town has done a lot on
Right,
capital facilities.
absolutely.
And part of that comes from all the capital improvements plan and the other.
So maybe
activities
somebody
on
wants
this.
to get in touch with the selectmen to see to what extent they want to have a new capital improvements plan developed?
When was the last done?
I mean, I think Yes, we should do that, but I think at least at a very general level, one of our responsibilities would be identifying what capital improvements we should be doing. Or we
Right,
should.
what ones have been completed and we don't need to worry about, or what ones need more maintenance now, or?
I can do that. I'll check with John.
Oh, here's the road standards, is that what you were looking
That was
for?
plus. If I take this home, so will that be a problem?
I can't imagine it would be.
I'll return it, I promise.
It's on film, you have to know.
I'm sorry?
I said it's on film, you have to know.
It's not so.
I don't see the last CIP over there, but I might have a copy in here.
These are adopted by the selectmen and planning board.
The road standards are selectmen, I believe.
That's what I thought too.
But we were consulted. I had a chance to look them over. Not that we have to say.
It looks like it was 2009 that was the last CIP. 2005 and 2009. Yeah, approved 128. Oh, 09, I think. Oh, no, 7.
Well, that was 4 years between, 4 years now.
Yeah.
Maybe time to have another look at it.
Yeah, it was approved January 28, 09. Okay. Oh, I'll email it to you.
Okay.
Okay, or you can let me know if you don't. I'll email it to you just in case.
What about the old library?
The old library.
There's a committee that's been working on spiffing it up and finding uses for it. In fact, they're having just noticed on e-news that they're having a work day. Is that this weekend?
I'm not
They've
sure.
gotten
Sure,
Monday
that
was.
could be on our survey.
By the way, the CIP must be on the planning board website.
We need to.
The CIP? It's the capital improvement program?
Sorry, what?
The capital improvement program?
I would expect it's on the planning
It
board
is,
website.
I got a copy.
Okay.
You mentioned old library as to being something on the survey as to what people.
I was just saying, well,
Yeah.
I was reading this master plan, and I just was, he said the Gray's Inn earlier about the garage, and I was just thinking about town-owned buildings in the area, the character of the town and use.
Yep.
Yeah, it could certainly be mentioned in there along with community facilities in general. You know,
I mean, so much has changed, obviously. I mean, it's a lot. I mean, it's incredible how much has changed since this plan's been written.
Amazing. Yeah.
It is amazing how much, what has happened.
Yeah.
So
It's
Let's
wild.
move it across the bridge, put it where the skating rink is. And then you could use it for art or whatever.
You could probably even
Because
get
where it
one of
is
the-
now, the church doesn't want any commercial activity there.
And they'd have to have, in order to do plumbing, they were going to have to put the line way over.
You know. So, but if they moved it up in front of the town hall,
And then you're going to have it.
You'd have to do it in
common
the-
septic system for both it and the.
yeah, then they could
You'd
combine
have
that.
to do it in the dead of night though, because you'd be killed if you did it in the daytime.
Why?
Because there are so many people that want it to stay right where it is.
No, they want it to stay. They haven't thought about it.
Actually, I like.
It could be sited much nicer and be more useful.
Dick, that's a great idea. It really is. Yeah.
And then the town would have it on town property.
Has it always been in that location?
No, it was moved
Yeah,
there.
it used to be across the river from the town hall.
Because the windows in the back used to look out on the river.
Okay.
Yeah, rather instead of a parking lot.
It used to be right near the,
Would it fit going over the bridge?
Well, it was when the bridge was upstream further too.
You just lift it up a little bit higher. What else should we be doing tonight, since we're
All
close to
right, I
8:30?
think we have nominating committee selection, which is an annual event. Is there anyone who would like to be on the nominating committee, or shall I just assign it? Volunteers? Volunteers, anyone?
You haven't spoken up yet.
Sorry. David, you want to be on the committee?
Oh, all right.
Who
Why don't you
else?
step forward?
Okay.
Who isn't here? Scott, well, yeah.
Scott
He's
and
up-
John.
He's up for reappointment.
Right, as am I, but,
Sure.
okay.
Great. You gonna get two?
Good.
Committee of two to come up with a slate for the officers. And
You know, actually, along with that, it might be smart to mention, I guess we have one planning board vacancy now as a full member.
I think it was.
The remainder of Ray's term, yes.
Yeah. And then we have at least a couple of alternate openings. So is there, for example, a current alternate member who would like to move up? In that case, that person should submit a letter to the selectmen, I think.
I think the selectmen are going to advertise for all the openings.
But I'm just saying that if there's
David,
somebody currently on the board, don't just...
So I just want to say one thing. So I'm going to be gone out of the country for the next 3 weeks, but I can meet with you when I get back prior to the meeting, so.
Well, I'll beat the bushes.
Okay.
I actually have somebody who's expressed an interest in this, so I would encourage them to apply.
Yeah, great.
The big chairman.
no, member. Well, according to the list that I have, that I think is fairly current, Mike, you are the senior.
I'm sure we double your pay if you moved up to full membership.
Nothing from nothing means nothing.
And then Larry, Darren, and let's see, Dave were appointed all at the same time.
We'll be in the selectmen to decide.
All right. And so then would have openings for two alternates. Okay. And it looks like, Frank, your term is up this year. Are you going to,
No, I think it goes up 2016 or something like that.
if you have, my list is 2010 for 3 years, but then if you've done it, if you've said you're going to continue, then we'll go to the 16 for another 3 years.
Normally, I think they've now had an established deadline for everybody where it renews on June 1st or April
Most of
30th or
them are in
something.
April, but I thought, I didn't realize, I don't think my extended, my term doesn't expire yet.
I have a list in the office, remember, Brad?
Yeah, well, I remember you said to me that there were 3 that were up this year, and it was Frank, Scott, and then
No, well,
it was George.
what Jeanette had for the ZBA was completely wrong, so well, go ahead. It doesn't matter. I mean,
Yeah, well, anyway, I was hoping that you would continue with that.
Normally, they do renew in the spring, so if you wouldn't have renewed yet if it expired
No, I
in
understand it
2013.
expires in April. I didn't, my understanding was my term is not yet up, but
Okay. All righty.
I just put that thought.
So Darren and David will come up with a slate for next meeting. Is there any old business? For new business, there was some question about, was I guess the selectmen had a question about whether there was a change made in the zoning ordinance when it was reformatted. And Betsy went through.
Yeah, did you get my-
I got, she took her Word is able to take two documents and see how different they are. And the issue that they were grappling with was a trailer. Is a trailer permitted or not permitted?
Right.
And from what Betsy's comparison showed was that there really wasn't a change in that section of it at all. And
I think that was a misunderstanding maybe because the FEMA group required us to change the wording from mobile home to manufactured home. And I think Jerry was confused because he saw, it was Jerry Doherty, I think, that first brought this up. And he saw in the current section on Village District that the use says, where is it now? The use is not permitted are businesses whose inventory for resale or lease includes petroleum products, self-propelled motorized vehicles, and then it said mobile home or travel trailers, and now it says manufactured or travel trailers.
but that's for the sale of.
Yeah, so that doesn't relate. And the only other use of the word mobile home or travel trailers or whatever, manufactured now, is, again, not relevant to that.
Oh, no, this is clause number 3 on the list that are not permitted, and that our current zoning ordinance prohibits facilities principally for the purpose of tents and trailers.
Right.
In other words, campgrounds.
And that's been interpreted, my understanding from Andy, is the town has felt that prohibits the occupancy of a trailer in the village district.
Which it does.
Well, Jerry, the selectmen think, we probably should table this until a selectmen's representative is here. But, the reason I brought this up was, the selectmen apparently, as I understand from Jerry, the selectmen believe that our reformatting introduced an error. I think we have to decide whether or not we did introduce an error and then correct it, or if we don't think there's an error, we should at least tell the selectmen we don't think there's an error there.
According to the comparison, there's been no change at that number 3.
Again, I think it makes more sense to wait for John Allen to be present.
Okay.
All right. And then we'll-
But is that's an error, what you said in the syntax of the sale of a mobile home versus a trailer, because it's talking about gas stations and so forth. That's incorrect, right? When it's,
No.
because wasn't the word changed from, you said mobile home to
To manufactured.
manufacturer? So if it's talking about gas stations and self-propelled vehicles, wouldn't there be the sale of mobile homes like Hills RV or like a car?
Well, those are totally prohibited, but this is a separate clause that says you can apparently have facilities for tenting or trailers.
Right, number
This
3
is not sale of trailers, this is
Right.
not the sale,
Yes.
this is the operation of the campground,
Of
or
the campground.
arguably just even one trailer on a lot.
Which
Yeah.
is different than if you have, what we've called mobile homes.
Mobile homes are totally permitted. Here the distinction is a trailer, generally not self-propelled, is something that has wheels and
Right.
is registered. If it doesn't have wheels and is not registered, it's then mobile home or manufactured home.
Right.
Which has to then comply with certain building codes that the trailer may not. So part of this is having to do with, there is a trailer up on some land in the Village District. And does that have to comply with building codes, or if not, if it's a trailer?
Because the wheels have been removed from it.
Yeah, so there's a number of issues here, but, the first, what the selectmen, I believe, have decided that, well, this part of the zoning ordinance, we made a mistake, be the planning board, and so trailers are allowed.
Trailers are allowed on individual lots, not on,
No, that's a mobile home.
yeah, okay,
Camper trailers.
There's a camper trailer.
trailers removed.
right.
Actually,
Well,
It says individual trailers or manufactured homes located on individual lots are permitted.
individual what?
It says, nothing hereunder shall be construed to prohibit individual trailers or manufactured homes located on individual lots, so long as such lot otherwise meets the minimum lot size requirements and setbacks under the ordinances.
Sure, that's in the current?
Yeah, that's section 11. I'm pretty sure that's still current. Yeah, right at the bottom of page 15 in the current one. It's just that you can't have a mobile home park or a manufactured home park.
okay. So if you want to, instead of building your house, you want to bring in a manufactured home, you can live in it, fine,
Right.
as long as everything meets the minimum lot size, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think there have been court decisions that say you cannot prevent somebody from having a trailer on an individual lot. You can prevent a mobile home park.
I think what we're distinguishing between a trailer, a registered trailer, versus mobile home or manufactured home.
Well, the way it's worded, you can have a trailer or a manufactured home on an individual lot. It doesn't even say you have to have a full framework so that you can't see the wheels or
Well,
anything.
but then we have a conflict because section 4 says you can't have trailers in the Village District.
No, you can't have a trailer. You can't sell them, and you can't have a camping area.
It says you can't
Well,
have
I mean, I didn't mean to get into
It
the
says
whole
you
long
can't have-
discussion.
spaces.
Well,
Yeah.
we're going to discuss it sometime.
Get it straightened out.
Wasn't it something about you can't have spaces for,
Camp facilities are space primarily for tenting and trailers. So if you have a travel trailer that you've got stored in front of your garage because you go out in the summertime for a week vacation,
That's not an issue. This is more where
You
the
have-
travel trailer is being used as a residence.
yeah, that's what is permitted, to have a trailer used on an individual lot as a residence.
so long as such lots otherwise meet the
The
minimum.
town has interpreted section 4 as saying you can't do that in the Village District.
Well, section 11 says you can do it anywhere.
No, no.
Okay, so it's a matter of interpretation, and I think it's
No, I mean,
very clear.
if
All right,
it's,
so if the question is whether a change was made in the meaning of the zoning ordinance when it was recodified, I think our answer is that no.
okay, we should just throw something.
I mean, some of the decisions they've made in the past, I remember the most amazing one was when they said that structures had to be 75 feet from the river. And if the river was 25 feet below, let's say there was sort of a cliff down to the river, that was the first 25 feet and then 50 feet over. They had some amazing ways of measuring things.
Well, but that's what changed.
That has changed.
Yeah. Now it's horizontal.
Now it is horizontally measured. But, so the selectmen have been interpreting things in bizarre ways from square one. Pardon me. You've been a
What's
selectman.
a trailer?
Oh, no, but I agree, because that was that whole thing up by Malone Road that
Now you're really good.
I can,
Do they measure it in the fall, the spring, the river?
Exactly.
Right after I read or not?
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
All right, any other new business? be brought before. Okay, do I hear a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thanks for noting that.